Okay, let's face it. When you think of the Amazon, the first thing that comes to mind is probably not purple martins. In fact, more likely, you're imagining some kind of outrageous bird like this male Guyanan cock of the rock. But I'm here to talk about purple martins in the Amazon. I'm Mario Conehaft. I'm a Massachusetts boy, educated in southern Louisiana, and moved to the Amazon some 35 years ago, where I study birds to this day. Let's back up and just get squared away about what the Amazon is. It's the largest area of tropical rainforest in the world. So you imagine this lush tropical rainforest, which really doesn't look like the kind of place that purple martins are likely to hang out. And of course, it goes on, this enormous expanse of unbroken, well, nearly unbroken rainforest. And you think of huge rivers, right, filled with islands where you can't even tell where the right bank begins and the left bank ends, and just enormous expanses of water. Wild creatures like the jaguar, the piranha, just ridiculous, huge catfish, like this one, which is actually delicious. And nifty, crazy plants like giant Amazon water lilies, where we're told that you can actually float a human baby on top of one of the leaves. Just for the record, we don't actually do that. That's not a thing, putting babies on water lilies, okay? Not cool. But, so the Amazon is this enormous lowland river basin surrounded by mountains, and basically takes up the northern half of South America. And so it's this dark green area surrounded by lighter colors on the satellite image. And when you say northern half of South America, that sounds like something pretty big. And in fact, that's right. The area is encompasses parts of 9 different countries. Most of the Amazon is in Brazil, but involves several other countries. And to give you an idea of scale, let's just sort of freeze this shape of the Amazon and spin the globe so that something more familiar to you is underneath it. That's right, the Amazon is nearly the size of the lower 48 states of the United States. It's one big place. To put it differently, the contiguous US, those 48 states are about 8 million square kilometers, the Amazon 7 million square kilometers. And it's an area filled with huge rivers, some of which you ought to have heard of. In fact, among the top 10 rivers in the world, most of them are the Amazon and its tributaries. Now, you may have heard, for example, of the Rio Negro, the Blackwater River on the left, where and it flows together meets the Amazon, the muddy water Amazon on the right, in front of the city of Manaus, which is where I am right now as I speak to you, a city of 2 million people. And these two rivers flow side by side for close to 100 miles before mixing completely. And the city, of course, is right smack in the middle of the Amazon. It has all kinds of city things, including this incredible opera house that was built in the late 1800s during the peak of the rubber boom, and is considered one of the best opera houses in the world. But getting to the point about birds, the Amazon has more birds than any other biome or ecosystem in the world. There's some 1,500 species of birds in the Amazon, almost half of which are endemic. That means they only occur in the Amazon. And getting to the point here at the bottom, in any given spot, the sort of the point diversity of birds, if you're just standing in a piece of woods and could count everything whose territory overlaps that area, there are some 250 species in any one place. If you expand the area a little bit to, let's say, the size of a park or a national park or something like that, where you get different kinds of habitats, different forest types, you should have some 500 species or more just in that park. So a lot of birds. And of course, the birds that you think of in the Amazon, again, are not purple martins. They're things like macaws, parrots, toucans, some of these crazy endemic families like the hoatzin, the trumpeters, the nocturnal echolocating cave-dwelling oil bird, really cool stuff. And of course, lots of little dicky birds. In fact, 1 in 4, roughly 1/4 of all the birds in the Amazon are either flycatchers or antbirds. And of course, can't resist that Guyanan cock of the rock. I'd love to go on about all the cool birds in the Amazon, but you're going to have to come down here and see them for yourselves. We're going to focus right now on purple martins. And again, the Amazon rainforest is not the place that you expect to find purple martins in. And to tell the truth, that's really reflected in our knowledge of purple martins up until recently. The sort of standard belief was that purple martins breed in this orange area in North America. They migrate through the yellow area, including the Amazon, and they winter in the blue area, southeast Brazil, Argentina, southern South America with more moderate, non-so-tropical climates. Well, until recently, that was sort of the common belief. We now know that the only thing that's changed in this figure is that the blue covers the entire Amazon, all of South America. Purple martins do winter in the Amazon. And the reason we know that is thanks to relatively recent technology, the use of tracking devices. So putting these little backpacks on purple martins in North America has allowed us to know that they'll spend their winter, the entire winter, in the Amazon basin. A recent study showed that purple martins tagged with these kinds of transmitters in various parts of their range, or the breeding range in eastern North America, all went to the Amazon and spent the winter in the Amazon. The only exception is the map A there, which are birds that did in fact go to southeastern Brazil, but they came from a totally different population than the one in the Pacific Northwest. So it may well be that all eastern North American purple martins spend their winter in the Amazon. And you might have thought that. I kind of thought that, because during the winter season, and in fact, purple martins start to show up as early as the second week of July down here, and throughout the northern winter and into April anyway, you can find purple martins kind of all over the place at any particular time. It's not at all unusual to find them on wires. They're not in the rainforest. They're in the cities, they're in towns, they're on wires, they're along the rivers, they're in more open places. They just can't squeeze in with all those other birds into the forest, which is not their thing anyway, right? You can find them at night, sometimes in big numbers, also on wires, sometimes near electric plants or by utility poles, sometimes in very big numbers. I remember one time I saw a scene like this along a road cutting across part of the Amazon, where I stopped after seeing that this abundance of martins perched covered almost a kilometer, almost a mile along the road. And I kind of counted 100 purple martins and estimated how much space they took up and kind of extrapolated along the wire and figured there was something like 12,000 purple martins along this one stretch of road one fine day in March back in the 90s. And then weird things happen once in a while that you hear about. Somebody's roof is getting thousands of purple martins roosting on it several nights in a row, but then they're gone. These weird sporadic events that lead you to think that they're around, but not always staying in the same place. And also in the 90s, there was quite a famous situation where huge numbers of martins, including purple martins and other swallows, roosted every night in an oil refinery in the city of Manaus. And it even got picked up by David Attenborough and shown on his program. So with that kind of background, when this motley crew came down to Manaus a few years ago and said, well, we have reason to believe that purple martins winter in the Amazon and that there may well be a very large roost right near Manaus. And I said, no kidding. You know, I'd seen the roost in the oil refinery, although that had since dried up. But I thought, heck yeah, there's going to be, I mean, you can't go out on the rivers during the right season and not see purple martins, is what I told them. And they were stoked from that. And they went out and spent several days on the rivers and did not see any purple martins. And I had that kind of used salesman feeling, like I just sold them a lemon. And I was like, well, the Amazon's a very big place. Did I tell you it's nearly as big as the lower 48 states? Or maybe it's not the right time of year. Did you go to the right places? Do you actually know how to identify purple martins? I didn't actually say that to them, seeing as they're like the world's experts in purple martins, but it might have just kind of crossed my mind. So there was the challenge. We needed to find the purple martins that I claimed were easy to find in the Amazon in the winter. And luckily they didn't give up. And a year later, they sent some really interesting and stimulating data. They said, look at this, Mario. We've got marked, tagged purple martins in North America. And here's one that spent every night on an island in the Rio Negro and would go out during the day, sort of off in a different direction every day, but every night would come back to this one island. And that got me really pumped up because this island is close to Manaus, only about 20 miles away. And it actually happens to be right in front of my country place. In fact, you can see it from the front porch. This is the view of the Rio Negro from the front of my country place, and those islands out in the middle, one of them is the island that they had tracked this purple martin to, and there was every reason to think there were other purple martins using it too. So this got us thinking, all right, this is something we can study. If we can find this roost, and it's near my country place, so we have a base and we're all set. Well, that made us brave enough to put up two Modus towers, Modus antennas, one at the actual country place and another one at the top of this big observation tower in the city of Manaus, thinking we might get birds coming overhead, and gave us the courage also to convince a graduate student, a young graduate student, to tackle purple martins for her master's study. And we went out to the country place at the right time of day, at the right time of year, and waited at nightfall to see if there were purple martins going out to the island. And we did see purple martins coming overhead, but they were going in a slightly different direction. And we couldn't tell where they were going. They were definitely not going to that island that we had been told the year before that this bird had been tracked to. So the student, Pamela, had a very smart idea, and she started to advertise using social media, asking people if they'd seen purple martins anywhere and hoping to get some information. I mean, theoretically, you can't miss a big roost of purple martins, right? Somebody ought to have seen this. Well, what I didn't tell you is that actually identifying purple martins in South America is not that straightforward. There are a lot of species of martins, and some of them look virtually exactly the same. Either the males look just like male purple martins, the females are different, or the females look like female purple martins, and it's hard to figure things out. So you get a lot of crying wolf. People will say, oh, we've got this big group of swallows that sleeps. They're big swallows, and they sleep every night on this tower that we use for measuring climate change. It's a 1,000-foot tall tower in the middle of the Amazon, and it's pooped all over it. And are these your birds? Well, they send a picture, and in this case, for example, it's gray-breasted martin, not what we were after. Well, the game changer was thanks to these folks here. Jose on the upper left, or Zé do Boto as he's known, is a guy who makes his living taking tourists to see pink river dolphins, which is what's shown in the right, that he is attracted to his floating kind of houseboat. And they come to eat fish out of his hand, and tourists can then see them, swim with them, and so on. And Ellen Garcia, at the bottom of your screen, was studying pink dolphins at the place where Zé, as we know him, Jose, attracted the dolphins. And Zé said to her one night, hey, you want to see something really neat? There's this, all these swallows come in at night to roost. You want to check it out? She said, sure. And she went and saw these birds coming in to roost and put two and two together and said, could these be Pamela's birds? Got in touch with us, took us to the roost, and the rest is history. The place she took us to is an island only a couple miles away from the island in front of my country place where we had been looking. Completely flooded at this time of year. That is to say, no bare ground at all. Only the tops of the trees sticking up through the water. In fact, most of what looks like bushes are actually just treetops, that the water level is so high that that's all that shows. And we got there in the late afternoon, and until pretty late, it was kind of nerve-wracking. It looked like nothing was going to happen. Where are these? We actually saw a few purple martins here and there, but didn't look like much, and we'd been sort of told it was quite a spectacle. But about 10 minutes before sunset, everything changed. All of a sudden, there were thousands and then more thousands and more thousands of purple martins coming in and forming this huge cloud over the island that all of a sudden then just literally like rained purple martins down into the vegetation where they perched to spend the night. We estimated we just goosebumps all over us after seeing this and hearing this and feeling the wind of the martins flying by you. We made a really coarse estimate of somewhere between 100,000 and 1 million purple martins roosting on this island that night. And that began this saga of research at this roost, a wonderful series of studies, many of which you're going to hear about in the upcoming presentations. Ze became our main and most important field assistant who could actually stand up on the bow of a boat and catch purple martins in his hands, put them into little bags, or we could bring them back individually to the field station, his floating house, where we studied, and then, of course, release them back on site after we were done. So all kinds of research, looking at molt, putting tags for tracking tags on birds, identifying other species of swallows also at the roost, and involving lots of students in interesting research. As of this discovery of the roost, we established a collaborative group called the International Purple Martin Working Group that includes people from Canada, institutions in Canada, the US, and in various parts of Brazil. And we meet actually and have been meeting once a week, almost once a week, for over 4 years now. It's a very fun-loving group and producing a lot of really neat research. Without giving any spoilers, because you're going to be hearing from the people that have done some of this research in the next talks, just to give you an idea of our main goals, the first and most important thing is just to understand the biology of the purple martin in winter. How many are we talking about? What is their life cycle like when they're here on the wintering grounds? Can we track them back to where they breed? What are they eating? What threatens them? Are they affected by all the toxins, all the pollutants in the environment? Is this Brazilian wintering ground part of the problem that their populations are having in North America, or vice versa? And then moving on, what is their role in the ecosystem? What impact do they have on the rest of the environment? Do they conflict with people? Are they involved in things that people don't like? Is there potential for tourism? Can we get citizen scientists involved in studying purple martins down here on the wintering grounds? Can we use them for environmental education? Can we protect the purple martin on its wintering roosts? And can we use them as a flag species to draw attention to conservation in general here in the Amazon? These are our main themes for research and dissemination of results. And this roost has become quite the sort of poster child. In fact, we've had a lot of attention by local news and been getting picked up by nature programs and magazines and some movies already. In fact, one of which I think you may have seen already, I hope. And lots of training of graduate students, people learning about science while they also teach us about purple martins from the things they learn. We've had some wonderful discoveries, some real surprises. Imagine finding in the middle of hundreds of thousands of purple martins, one that's got bands on it already. Somebody banded this bird in Connecticut, and we picked it out of a bush in the middle of the Amazon in Brazil. In fact, that's happened twice now. Connecticut birds picked up by us down here. We've also learned about what's eating them. There's a pair of peregrine falcons that hangs around the roost, and sure enough, you can see them picking off a martin or two every day. That's what's going on in this picture, although it may be a little hard to tell. And at night, there's something called a Stygian owl that also hangs around the roost, and is probably preying on the occasional purple martin as well. And some other wonderful and surprising discoveries that don't have directly to do with purple martins. While Jessica, who'll be presenting in a little bit, was diving in the water and collecting algae-covered leaves from the water, she and Zay actually found, in the middle of these flooded bushes, a puppy. This little dog was apparently lost or abandoned, maybe fell off a passing boat, nowhere near any human habitation, was clinging to the vegetation in the middle of these flooded bushes, its legs being eaten by fish. And Jessica saved the dog, and I couldn't resist. I took it home, and he lives with me to this day. He's become sort of the mascot of our group. In fact, with all due respect, known, you guessed it, as Joe. So this is our group, part of our group, and in fact, there are lots of people that together with us have been helping us study these purple martins over the last several years, and they'll be presenting their work to you now. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you, Mario. Let me find you here. My staff is blowing up the chat right now. They are laughing about the dog named Joe. To be fair, that was not my idea. It was just a coincidence. I don't remember what I wanted to call it. Martin or
we thought
Puma.
about calling him Martin, yeah.
Yeah.
And we also thought about calling him Wilson from Shipwrecked, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, but he's doing great now. He actually lives with Mario, and his legs have healed from all the piranha bites. And
actually, hang on a second.
He's a dad.
Maybe I can. Yeah. Maybe I can. There's his best friend, and the mother of his kids, and there he is. They've taken over the couch.
There we go. Awesome, a celebrity in the house. All right, there's been a lot of questions, Mario, yesterday and throughout the day today, and then in the comments from your chat, you were showing the kind of the other martin species there that are similarly, shaped and colored and everything. But what are those species, and then also what other species are in the roost with martins, because it's a mixed roost, right?
That's right. And in fact, one of our problems is figuring out what proportion of this huge number of birds is actually purple martins. Most of the time, you can tell that it's the great majority are purple martins. But as the season progresses, the roost seems to sort of stay the same size, and purple martins become less and less common as other species join in. So the second most common species is something called a brown-chested martin. And they are actually complicated in their own right, because there's two different subspecies. One of them is resident to the Amazon, and the other is migratory from the south. So as our birds are heading north for the springtime, it's starting to get cold in southern South America. And these southern brown-chested martins are migrating off of their breeding grounds in the south north to their wintering grounds in the Amazon, and they join the roost. And in fact, watch for those two to be split eventually into two distinct species in the future. But we also get decent numbers of barn swallows. In fact, there are huge numbers of barn swallows wintering in the Amazon, but not that many use the roost, but dozens of them at least use our roost. Our roost, you like that? We just completely,
Yeah.
It's ours now, right? All
Yeah,
those purple martins are ours.
We work for it.
That's right. They're the occasional bank swallow, but then there are these other martins like gray-breasted martins, which also are really too complicated to figure out easily. Some are resident, some are migrants from further north, some are migrants from further south, and there's a lot to be figured out about that someday. And now, even more recently, just in the last couple of years, we've come to know from tracking devices that the Cuban martin, which looks just like, the males look just like male purple martins, winter in South America, in Brazil, in the Amazon. It was thought that maybe they stayed in Cuba or something, or went somewhere else in the Caribbean. No, they come down here. Caribbean martins outside of Cuba also come down here. And on top of that, there's something called the southern martin, which also, the males look exactly like purple martins, and they also migrate from the south to the north. And so they're kind of replacing purple martins as they're leaving the roost. And so it's a challenge for us to figure all this out. And even the simple identification is not that well understood. So we've got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time looking at the underside of various martins sitting on power lines, and even in Brazil, there's not really a in the common conversation, just Andorinha azul is just any swallow that happens to have a little bit of blue on it, right? There's the little bitty house martins and all that other stuff, right? Or house swallows.
Yeah, there's something called blue and white. I think it's called blue and white swallow. They're very small, but they're quite bluish. They're kind of like tree swallows, and they live in towns and stuff. And some people, if I was joking about Joe and Kevin and Jason not recognizing purple martins, but there are a lot of people that are interested in participating and contributing, but that really don't know their birds all that well, or they may know most birds pretty well, but they don't know all these swallows. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done too, and I'm guessing that Erica is going to talk some about that in her presentation.
Yeah, we'll hear a little bit more about that. I got Bobette in chat, says, are purple martins considered a pest bird in cities in Brazil?
Yes and no. Mostly yes. I think that is where they're considered anything at all, where people know them, is when they're in cities. And then they poop all over everything. That's kind of a drag. I used to get consultations from the oil refinery folks back in the 90s saying, what can we do about all these swallows that are dumping all over the pipes and everything? We have to wash this whole refinery down every day with hoses, and it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, and we think that they could be corroding the pipes eventually. And while I was kind of hemming and hawing and stammering and didn't really have a solution for them, they apparently either found their own solution or the martins just bailed. But they just suddenly stopped going there. But this sort of thing goes on elsewhere in the Amazon, especially at local, small town power plants. There are these diesel-run power plants in small Amazonian cities that make a huge racket, right? There's just blah, 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 enormous generators all night long, but lots of transformers and posts and wires coming out of them, and they fill up with purple martins and other species at different times a year. So there seems to be something about this dense network of perches that allow them to be close together, and especially in a lit up place where they can see around, that all these big swallows like for roosting. But most people do, sorry, the question was, are they a pest? Yeah, where they show up in, just like the symphony, that we saw yesterday, even though people love birds and love the spectacle, it's just not that fun being under all that poop. And people complain about it. We've had a similar problem with parakeets here in town also, just urban things. But they also are very famous in Brazil for marking the passage of time. And there's a famous kind of country song, a Brazilian country song.
Sing
about
it.
How okay.
You know you
As
wanted to.
andorinhas voltaram, e eu também voltei. The idea is that the swallows are back, and I'm back too. It's spring again, and let's fall in love. That kind of stuff. So people do notice them and care about them in one way or another. So we've got a foot in the door, let's say, for public relations.
You know you wanted to sing, so I had to just serve it up for you. All right. One more question before we go on to I think Eliani's next. Um, Tom asked, "Do the martins molt after they arrive in Brazil, or do they wait and molt before they leave?" I think he means before they leave from North America. So
Yeah,
what do we know about molt?
that's a great question, Tom. And Eliani's going to talk a little more about that, but it's a really important thing. They molt their flight feathers, their wing feathers and tail feathers while they're here in Brazil. And that has any number of implications for us. It's important because we think that that may be affecting their timing. That is to say that finishing molting and having a nice set of fresh flight feathers may be one of the important triggers for them to say, now I'm ready to go back. I'm set for flying. Eliani will talk more about that in just a minute. But the other thing is, since we know that those feathers are molted in Brazil, if we want to study toxins and contaminants and things like that, they're stored in feathers, and we can know which feathers were put on and which feathers were grown in Brazil and which ones were grown in North America. So we can start to get a handle on where contaminants are affecting our birds. And that's going to be talked about in Jonathan's presentation in a little while also.
All right. Well, Mario, thank you so much for presenting. Always fun. And if you don't mind chiming in if there are any other questions that we missed. I'll be seeing you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks. I just real quick, I just want to say thank you to everybody that I forgot to say in the talk. My talk went over a little bit and I got nervous about going too long and forgot to say that you all are terrific. I mean, the reason we're doing this work is because you all care and it's making it happen down here. And we just hope we can return the favor someday.
Awesome. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you.